Guys, we are here. We are going to talk about the Book of Job, and my honest thoughts, like right at the gate, this is better. This is so much better. I'm glad we have refocused our story on the character of Job. I really appreciated how much simpler this was. But there are still some things about this that I just can't imagine like happening in real life. Like if I okay, all right, hang on, let me explain. Okay, if I like lost my wife, lost my crops, if I lost everything, and then my like three best friends came to me and were like, "Well, you must have done something wrong for this to happen." I would start probably throwing hands with them. All right, I would not just sit there and like take it. I mean, I guess he was like Job was like sick and like dying with like warts all over his face and like he. I feel so bad for this guy. I feel so incredibly bad, but that is kind of what, and I think that's what made it really good. You know, I think that's what made it really good. Um, I didn't know that Satan meant the word Satan meant accuser in like Hebrew or something. I think that fits really well with like what the actual story of the Bible is. Not the modern Satan that's just all demons and horns and stuff. No, he is like a fallen angel. Um, I I was really happy reading the Book of Job. I really was. So I thought the Book of Daniel. On to the Book of Daniel now. I thought that was pretty good. I knew a lot less about it. But I did know that this is where the lines were coming from, like God saving him from the den of lions. And I thought of something really weird. I was like, is this why he's called a Daniel Tiger? Like, because I know that's supposed to be like a Mister Rogers thing with Daniel Tiger, and then it's kind of like going into and Mister Rogers that originated from like he has some Christian origins. I don't know that, but like it's Mister Roger. I'm sure he does. So I just thought that was very. I thought that was very interesting, kind of looping all that. Even though it's not a tiger, it's a lion, but I'm sure somewhere you could just easily insert tigers instead. Tigers and lions are like the same thing, and just one's in the jungle and one is in the desert. They're like the same thing. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, I want to talk about what I'm reading now. So, what we're doing now is we are doing Metamorphoses by Ovid. I've heard people say Ovid. I'm going to say Ovid. I think Ovid sounds a lot cooler than Ovid. But we're doing that by Ovid. And this is gonna take a bit longer to read. I tried listening to some of it, like in the car and stuff, and I just can't wrap my head around it. It's very lyrical, so it's probably gonna get a letter upgrade from, I'd say the Iliad or the Odyssey, but if you ask my personal opinion, I think this might get an A plus. I'm in the very beginning of reading Metamorphoses by Ovid. I have the first story down, the story creation. I think because this is going to take me so much longer, I think I want to break up the individual stories and books I'm reading of Metamorphoses and make shorts talking about them. And then, so that'll be like 12 more shorts that I'm going to upload because I think there's a total of like 12 books in Ovid's Metamorphoses, which is a collection of books in a book. Old books are weird like that. Old books are weird like that. If I get to a point where it's taking me really long to read like novels, maybe I might have to break it up chapter by chapter, or I might just summarize it into part one and part two. I don't know what I'm gonna do because like later in this reading list I have, it's gonna tell me to read like all of Charles Dickens, and I'm not gonna review all of Charles Dickens like popular books by in just one video. That is gonna take me like literally like 400 hours to do that. He's got like 8 books that are like 50 hours worth of like listening to or dear knows if I'm sitting there and having to read all the novels, because that's probably something I'll have to do. Because the novels are different than the epics, right? So we have the epics, right, which is all about patterns of humanity. So we have big concepts of good and evil. That's why we're in all these biblical epics. We have these great questions of like what is justice, what is this, and corresponding that to the epics of and then Gilgamesh, Iliad, Odyssey that we've listened to as well. You could see very big patterns of humanity in those as well. You could see very big patterns of great floods, tragedy, great adventures. I used to think epic just meant adventure, which because I knew the Odyssey was an epic poem. But what I'm learning now is that it's much more just about patterns. That's why we have these biblical epics. And these biblical epics are very foundational. They offered me like a great glimpse into what I'm going to be doing throughout more of the epics when I get to a little more to Arthur and Charleston Crusade and Piers Plowman in the medieval area medieval era of epic poems. I'm going to be ready for that. Something we already reviewed on my channel, the one where I'm hitting a really sick chest day. I reviewed Beowulf, and again, I didn't mention it in that video then, but I really wish I did. Is that there was so much patterns in it, patterns through the whole thing. And I mentioned that it was done in Old English, and it was originally supposed to follow this this section that was like, well, I'm gonna say some nonsense right now, but the way it was supposed to sound when it was happening was like Prithian, Prithior, bring here and bring it here. Like it was supposed to like have this lyrical flow to it that we've lost from the Old English translate. Well, we haven't lost it. I don't know Old English, so I had to listen to it in English, and we don't have a rhyming translation. At least that's not the one I did. If you do know a rhyming translation of Beowulf somewhere that kind of follows the same patterns, like lyrically, I would totally listen to that one again. I would totally listen to that again. And that's why I can listen to some of these epic poems, and that's why I can't listen to some of them. Because some of them are very lyrical. They follow a very nice flow to them. And sometimes that helps me. Sometimes it helps me, and sometimes that hurts me. Sometimes it helps me because it lets me like follow it better. Like I can better kind of predict and understand what they're saying, because like, okay, they have the last part of the stanza, which is cat. Okay, what's gonna happen next? Hat. Like I can kind of follow it preemptively, which makes it a bit easier while I'm idling something. But then on the other hand, like when I started listening to a little bit of Virgil and a little bit of the Metamorphoses by Ovid, what happened was I would get kind of lost in that lyrical flow. I would get sort of lost in it, and my mind would start to wander and think about other things when I really want to focus on what I'm trying to listen to. So that's why with these next two, I've got the version on my Kindle, and I'm actually going to be reading it. And if I can find an audiobook that follows along with it, I will read it and listen to it at the same time. Oh, I just did a lot of talking. Guys, that was awesome. That was awesome. I was on a roll. Anyways, yeah, after all that, that felt really good. I plan to just kind of rant passionately in more of my videos, and I think that'll be doing a little better. That'll make me a bit happier with how these turn out. But yeah, when I start reading novels, which is more about human consciousness and not so much large patterns, I'm gonna have to read those very intently. So like when I do read, so my plan for that is I can't get lost while reading those. Like if I miss a paragraph, I need to go back and read that paragraph. Novels are so succinct, so tight with what they're like saying, that I really am gonna have to just like sit down and read those, which is really gonna slow down the production of my content on this platform. And I really don't want to do that, but at the same time, I I've started to really enjoy the reading a bit more than the video making, honestly. But I'm just gonna keep on the video making because I get lost in what I have and haven't read. So it's kind of nice to like go back and look and be like, oh wait, yeah, I did read a lot of Moby Dick. Oh wait, yeah, I did. I did read all of Beowulf, and so like I'm gonna keep on making the videos, but it's less so for you guys and more so for me at this point, because I'm really just getting to track my own journey, and I find that super cool. But on the tracking of the journey, sometimes I'm well, because sometimes I will do it for the content. Sometimes, like if I'm towards like the middle of something I really don't like reading, like of a chapter or something, and I'm like, oh, I'll tell myself, I'll say, okay, well, if I get to the end of this chapter, that's one step closer to making a video, and then once I make the video, moving on to something else. So, yeah. I'm done with the biblical epics now, so I should probably talk about that a bit more in its completion. I don't know what I'm going to title this video. I'll have to title this video like Job, Daniel, and Biblical Epics Review. So, let me go grab my phone. Let me grab some notes. Okay, so it's really interesting. So, I'm going to go over my entire reading plan right now. My entire reading plan for my epics section that I'm doing first. And then I'm going to go over my novel section. Or, I'm going to give you guys some choice here. Should I go by time wise, or should I go by genre, right? Because what I have here is I have stories for channel, right? And up here you can see I have my biblical epics. All right, I have Genesis, Exodus, Judges, Samuel, Kings, Chronicles, Job, and Daniel. That's all crossed off because I've read those. And then as you can see, we're going to go like classical epics, medieval period, Renaissance period. And then there is romantic, Victorian, and modern epics. So, I could go by time like that. Or, as you see, I have all the same sections, sort of, for novels too. And this novel section, it's a lot longer than the epic section, I will say, because a lot of the epics and hang on, do I have? I do have Wuthering Heights on here. Okay, so I might jump ship here after I read Ovid's Metamorphoses and read Wuthering Heights from my Victorian novels section, because that's topical. It's that thing coming out, so I might do that for you guys. But if I don't want to, I'm not going to. So that's gonna be very interesting. Let's see. Yeah, so I could go by time or I could go by genre. I've been going by genre, but if I get to some of these things and I'm like, I really don't want to, I'll jump ship and I'll do a novel or something. It's the whole reading list. I'll go through it. I'm gonna try to do it in order because I feel like I'm gonna get a little more out of that, and I feel like I already have gotten a lot out of this experience so far. But yeah, so that's what we're kind of going to go through. You can look at, if you want to pause when I'm showing my phone and look at the reading list for yourself or anything, you can go ahead and do that. But let's review kind of all the biblical epics so far. So, what we're essentially dealing with the biblical epics is a long section of a back and forth between humanity and the Israelite God. And there's lots of details. It is very much also a historical account. So that's something that cannot be taken as separate from the literary analysis of it. And it's sort of in that back and forth struggle that we read there that is really evident about the pattern of these epics. Even though they're not written as epic poems, in a literary sense, they can satisfy the conditions of an epic poem. So I find that very interesting. And not very interesting, but it's just where they kind of would classify. So then we start with Genesis. I think Genesis was really good. It really establishes the family and the what is going to be the kingdom of God. You have the original sins. It's great to see the start of everything, and then you go into Exodus. Exodus is endlessly fascinating too because you have a lot of other iconic elements of it that are become very ingrained into the Western canon as a whole, like these ideas of exile from not exile from Egypt, but like all of these ideas and all of these symbolisms are 100% going to come in epics later. For some reason I'm thinking about later on my reading list the Fairy Queen as something that might be very biblically evident, but like things are going to come up of it, and I'm sure like Le Morte d'Arthur, um, there's going to be some stuff there too that is very biblically grounded. And I would actually really recommend the order I read this in to anyone trying to get into the Bible as well. Because I remember myself, right? I tried to get into the Bible a long time ago, and I would just watch like the kind of the Bible Project videos, and I think I read a decent amount of Genesis. But the moment I got to Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, my interest was kind of waning, because those stories are those parts of the Bible are very like law based. It's not to say that they're not important to their own stories. The people quote Leviticus all the time when discussing political things, but it's because it is much less of a story, more so like a rule set. Like that's just dealing with Moses in the tabernacle and such like that. And it's I don't want to say that it's skippable because it has its own merits, but I would say that if you are trying to understand the story and the patterns of the Bible, it is not the most necessary piece for you to read. I would go on ahead and just do the same order I did. So, go from Exodus to Judges. And also, again, this is a very, like, kind of, I think not so controversial of an opinion, but I actually didn't review Chronicles. You might see Chronicles on that list. Because Chronicles is very much a retelling of Samuel, but it paints David in like a little bit of a different light. So if you really are a big fan of David in that story, you might want to overview Chronicles again, because that's just what it does. It reviews David in a much different, not a much different way, but it reviews it differently, which is very cool, honestly. And then after that, I hit up Job. I'd hit up Daniel because, especially Job, because that is one of the wisdom books of the Bible. The Bible has 3 wisdom books. I'm forgetting what the other 2 are, but I know Job is one of them. I need to be a little bit better about that stuff before I just say that. But yeah, Job is one of the 3 books of wisdom in the Bible. It really answers like the question. It doesn't. Well, that's a very important thing about it. It doesn't answer the question of why do bad things happen to good people. That's the important thing. It does not answer that question. It's basically, it's kind of like when your mom and dad, right? Well, when you're really little, and you ask your mom and dad a question about like sex or something, and they kind of give you that like, this whole thing is like, you gotta wait, you'll never understand it kind of thing. Well, that's not what they say. That's a really bad example. But God doesn't answer the question. Instead, he shows Job the complexity and the intricacies of every moving piece in the world around him. And what he says is that we will never understand the true reason why things are happening to us. But what we can do is choose to live and make the best of it. Which, I don't know, personally, I just think that is a very powerful story and a very powerful thing to say. That I think would help a lot more people than just simply answering, oh, it's because you sinned. Like, because that's not how the God of Israel works. That's not how the God works. That's not how God works. And that's really beautiful. Alright. This yapping session is getting a bit long. It's going to take a while to upload this one. In total, I cannot recommend you give the biblical epics a shot. I cannot recommend that enough. So, again, I'm not going to score it like out of F, A, B, C, D like that, because I think just religious texts, even if I end up reading like the Talmud or something, I want to just be respectful, and I'm not going to like rank something an F. But because, you know, if like I'm just not gonna do that. But yeah, I can't recommend them enough. I will see you guys in the next video when I'm talking about Metamorphoses by Ovid. And yeah, I will see you all later. Alright, peace out.